So much. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. And it's great to be here. Thank you for giving me the honor of sharing a few words about this week's parsha. When I was growing up in England a long time ago, I remember my rabbi telling me that Moses, despite leading the Israelites out of slavery and through the desert for 40 years, was not allowed to enter the promised land. Because when God told him to speak to the rock to give water, instead, he struck it in anger. And I remember even as a child thinking that was a pretty harsh punishment for hitting a rock. But one thing my rabbi never mentioned to me was some of the other problematic conduct of Moses that we see in this week's parsha, a parsha which, among many other issues, deals with the war between the Israelites and the Midianites. Now, full disclosure, I've spent most of my professional career working on human rights and humanitarian issues. I've worked on the protection of civilians in conflict in many different countries, and atrocities in conflict offend me personally and professionally. This week's parsha is full of atrocities that are ordered by Moses and carried out by the Israelites. For example, the parsha describes how Moses tells the Israelites, "Take revenge for the children of Israel against the Midianites. Afterwards, you'll be gathered to your people." And Moses sent the Israelites with clear instructions to kill. As the parsha tells us, they took the field as the Eternal had commanded Moses, and they slew every male. But it gets even worse. The children of Israel took the Midianite women and their small children captive, and they plundered all their beasts, livestock, and possessions. And it gets even worse. When the commanders came back to Moses with news of all they had killed and with the plunder and the booty and the prisoners they had taken, what did Moses say? He said, "Did you allow all the females to live?" Did you allow all the females to live? Or in essence, what he was asking, why did you allow all the females to live? And he went on to say, "Now therefore, slay every male among the dependents, and slay also every woman who has known a man, but you can spare those women who are too young to have known a man, to have had sex with a man." So Moses not only sent the children of Israel to win a war, but he did so by ordering them to kill men, women, and to loot, plunder. That's a pretty long list of problematic conduct. Now, admittedly, it was a long time ago, but it's still a tough read where Moses, our venerated leader, our forefather, orders men, women, and children to be killed. So what should we make of it? Well, the good news is that some things have improved. We know that war is a terrible thing, but there are laws of war that seek to ensure that its conduct is as humane as possible. And precisely because of the atrocities of World War II and the Holocaust, the laws of war, the Geneva Conventions, were rewritten in 1947 to explicitly prohibit attacks on civilians or inflicting unnecessary suffering, as was described in the parsha. Now, we know from the news every single day from around the world that leaders still order their soldiers to kill civilians, but they know it's wrong, and we know it's wrong, and sometimes the bad guys even get prosecuted and brought to justice for such crimes. In 1997, the international community created the International Criminal Court to bring to justice the worst of the worst. And just last month, Ratko Mladic, the butcher of Bosnia, who sent his troops to massacre Muslims in Srebrenica in 1995, had his appeal denied and was sentenced to life imprisonment for his crimes. So sometimes there is justice. But it still for us begs the question of what to make of it all. And why do we read the parsha on a Shabbat morning? Could we not just hide the text, pretend it never happened, pretend that Moses didn't send out the Israelites to commit atrocities? Well, presumably we could, but we don't, because truth matters. Truth is a pillar of Judaism. As the Yale historian Tim Snyder wrote, My experience as a historian of mass killing tells me that everything worth knowing is discomforting. My experience as a teacher tells me that the process is worth it. I remember in a previous job interviewing a man from South Sudan whose son had been taken away and killed by security forces who had not even returned the son's body. The man knew that he would never likely get to bury his son, nor would he ever see the perpetrators brought to justice. But he wanted the story of his son's death told. Tell his story, he pleaded to me, so that my son will not be forgotten and the truth will not be lost. In the Pirkei Avot, the Ethics of the Fathers, it says, on three things the world stands: on justice, on truth, and on peace. And without truth, the telling of stories, however difficult they may be, there can be no peace, there can be no justice. And without justice, there can be no peace, at least no real and sustainable peace. So even as the Midianites treated us harshly, and even though a military response may have been warranted, both we, the Israelites, and they were profoundly diminished by the excessive cruelty that Moses demanded. And so by telling this story in our holiest texts, perhaps we offer some justice to the Midianites so unjustly treated by Moses. And there's one more lesson to be taken from this parasha. Be wary of leaders. Be very wary of leaders. It's good to have heroes. It's wonderful to have leaders whom we can campaign for, vote for, admire, respect, and seek to hold accountable. But we're living in an age of demagoguery and autocracy. And in many countries, way too many countries, leaders are not being challenged or not allowing themselves to be challenged when they violate human rights. Reading today's parasha reminds us, always question, always challenge, always insist on the freedom of expression that allows us to criticize and insist on respect for rights, for justice, and for compassion, even during war, perhaps most especially during war. Shabbat Shalom.